It's my pleasure to introduce to the stage Fernando Bothelo from UNICEF. And Fernando is a good friend of ours and is going to talk about assistive technology, what's missing and why aren't we there already. So without further ado, I'll give the microphone to Fernando.
Thank you so much, Ian. Hello, everybody. It's a true pleasure to be here. I'm Fernando Bothelo. I'm program specialist at UNICEF. I'm based in New York normally at headquarters. And I will not talk about UNICEF today. There's some other interesting stuff I want to share with you. So just don't tell my boss. Before joining UNICEF, I had a 13-year intensive course on humility, or what you might also know as having a startup. And my objective back then was, hey, I want to improve the educational opportunities and income-generating opportunities for persons who are blind, more specifically 40 or 50 million of them. So it didn't quite work out that way, and I had a lot of time to think about why. And kind of the most immediate reaction you get is, hey, maybe your goal was a little too ambitious. And I thought a lot about that because goals, in my opinion, have to be inspiring. So was that really the problem? I read about a case, and we'll get out of AT and we'll come back. I read about a case of Paul O'Neill. O'Neill was a CEO of a company called Alcoa, Aluminum Company of America, or aluminium, as you guys would say. This was back in the late 80s, early 90s. He came in and shocked everyone that was expecting to hear, hey, we'll maximize profits, cut costs, so forth, so forth. And instead of saying that kind of stuff, he said, we are going to bring accidents on the job to zero. And nobody really understood him. The stock price went down, and for quite a few years, this was a fairly painful process. They already had very good levels of safety compared to everybody else in their industry. And what happened? When you have a very bold, ambitious goal like that, and you're taking it seriously, you really have to rethink everything, the way you do everything, the way you train your employees, the way you collaborate, the way you work with unions, the way you compensate people, the manuals, the instructions, the equipment, the production process, and that's what they did. So that's ambitious. Some people would say fantastic not realistic objective. Well, that quintupled, whatever the word is, multiplied by 5 the revenues of the company, multiplied many times the profits. It was a tremendous success. It took a few years, but it was an enormous success. So when I think about my own ambitious, bold, inspiring objective, I don't think that was the wrong part. There might be a mismatch between my understanding of the objective and where I fit in it, but the objective was the right thing to do, to have it ambitious. There's a word for that, and it's called obliquity. Yes. So why do you need an objective that is oblique to what otherwise people would assume you want to accomplish? So you want to accomplish higher profits. Why do we have to worry about people? You want to have, a long-term, long-lasting, major industry player, very successful. Why do you have to worry about bold objectives like, yeah, we're going to colonize Mars? And the reason is that people do not get inspired by improving profits by 20%. Nobody is impressed if you want to reduce unemployment by 3%. Everybody needs an ambitious, an inspiring, a worthwhile goal so that they can really think through what do they need to do best How do they rethink the way they do things? Now, what does any of this have to do with assistive technology? Well, assistive technology, generally speaking, is really not the issue, is it? It's really the platform. Wheelchairs work really well. The problems are the steps. Computers are amazing. They speak these days, they do all kinds of stuff. But if the website is not designed appropriately, that becomes a real issue. Now, you'd think that this is new, but it's not. This has been taking place after every single major switch of technological platforms. So when people went from mainframes to microcomputers, from microcomputers with text interfaces to graphical user interfaces, from GUIs to the web, from the web to Web 2.0, from the usual websites to social media, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, whatever becomes fashionable and takes over the marketplace and the environment where we work and live and socialize, that platform starts by being inaccessible. Big shocking news, we're not a priority. As an example, a major internet company took 7 years after they launched to create a team to deal with accessibility. 7 years in internet time, that's an eternity. Yeah, in other words, they had to conquer the market. They were already the top destination online before they started worrying about persons with disabilities. Now, I'm not even going to mention the name because, it would be fun to hate it altogether. But it's kind of silly to hate them because everybody else is doing the same thing, right? So I think what we really need to do is to change the equation. Change it so that systematically it makes sense. It makes sense for those who want to be profitable and have companies that are long-lasting. Makes sense to give accessibility priority. Make it accessible by default, not afterwards with all kinds of gimmicks and reformatting and reconstruction of whatever structure you had to then make it accessible 7 years or however many years afterwards. How do we do that? Well, why don't we go back to obliquity? Now, what could be an inspiring objective for us to have? An inspiring objective for any industry leader to have? Do you want to maybe have the highest satisfaction rates, the highest loyalty of any company in your industry? Well, that would require a very close understanding and a very close relationship with every one of your customers. It would require us to use the types of technologies we are using today to manipulate elections or track people in everything they do, to, instead of being invasive, to have a high-quality relationship with millions of people through technology. It would require maybe a OODA loop. You may have heard of this before. OODA, observe, orient, decide, and act. So every time you get a complaint, you act on it. You think it through, you decide what to do, you implement the changes in the code. If it's a digital company, you implement the changes in the training and everything else if you're not a digital company, and you act on it. And you do that a few million times, and before you know it, you're going to be at the top of your game. And you're going to be ahead of everybody else. Because if you're doing this OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act, you're doing it with technology, you're doing it efficiently, you're doing it consistently and continuously, you're going to be ahead of everybody else in your industry all the time. And guess what? You cannot have the highest satisfaction rates, the best sales, the best anything in your industry if you don't take into consideration persons with disabilities. So why don't we have an inspiring objective to actually be a company that changes the world, or at least changes its world, the world of its customers? Because if that's your goal, you're going to have to implement a really efficient system to listen and have actual conversations with your customers in large scale. And you're going to do it including persons with disabilities. Now, that's just an example. There's so much more we can do. Whether you call it obliquity or wisdom, the idea here is for us to make accessibility a reality by default. And if we do it in any meaningful way, in a large company, in a medium-sized company, in a way that becomes visible, becomes the envy of its competitors, everybody else is going to go and emulate them. And that's how you get change in a way that is sustainable. The next platform that comes along, whether it's AI-based or smartphones or wearables or whatever it might be, it hopefully will be accessible from the start. Would that advice have helped me? Well, maybe I would not have taken 13 years to learn my lessons, but we'll never know. Thank you very much.
Are you okay to answer a couple of questions? You sure?
Yes.
Yes. So I imagine we may have one or two questions for Fernando. So I'll open the floor here, if that's okay. If you would like to indicate to me if you have a question for Fernando, we can come to you with the roving microphone. Yes.
Yeah, earlier a guy with wheelchair skills talked about I couldn't make money from the NHS or something. In the case of wheelchair users, from business perspective, if you can create value for the company or save cost for the company, wouldn't that be equate a business because you are doing a favor for them?
Yes, saving costs, improving the efficiency of a company is the best way to win the businessman's heart. But I think the problem is never, we're against saving. I think the equation that business people and people outside of business have difficulty with is saving it right now and immediately or saving it over time. And do you want to improve your efficiency by 10% now or by 40% over 2 or 3 years or however long that might be. So that's usually the trick. In the business sector, there is a lot of pressure to have immediate results, whereas society as a whole needs solutions that are a little more long-lasting and a decision horizon that is further down the road, because otherwise you have a mismatch. You have cost savings that have a nice result financially in the immediate term, but do a lot of damage to society or people or the environment in the medium to long term. So that's the challenge.
Thank you, Fernando. We have one more question down the front here. Yep, I'll give you the mic.
Thank you, Fernando, for your wonderful presentation. My name is Israel. I'm also a person with disability, but I would like to ask this question from you. More than 80% of persons with disability are in low and middle income countries. And how do you convince some of those businesses, like to be inclusive, to factor in persons with disability? The first thing they will tell you is this: what's the value? Why do we need to include them? We've not taken care of the general population. Why do you think they should include us?
Thank you so much for that question. I think it has to be a sales process, right? Now, imagine yourself, of course, we are all here very familiar with disabilities and with the talent that exists in our community. But when you think about business people, your average business person or your average person in general does not have much experience with persons with disabilities. Or they may have, but not in the context of business. So you want to make it easy for them to take that risk. There are two ways that I think that come to mind immediately in my case. And one is internships, right? You need to make it very low risk for them to get to know you and your talents, so that then they will jump at the opportunity of hiring you afterwards. So let's convince those business leaders to give, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever time duration it might be of an internship, to give you a chance to show them what you're capable of. So that's one. The second thing that comes to mind is, in businesses, you know what works, you do what works. You don't mess with what works. But sometimes persons with disabilities need to combine pieces of 2 separate jobs differently, right? So if you have to do A, B, and C in one job, D, E, and F in another job, sometimes you want to combine, have one person do A, C, and F, and the other person do B, D, and E. Because, one of those activities involves seeing fine print, and you happen to be blind like myself, and, that's not very convenient, or the equipment is not as productive and efficient at letting you do that, and whatever reason. So you analyze, you get people that are positive, are willing to take, at least small risks, and see if you can design a job around your strengths so that you can show how competitive you are, and you're going to be hired in no time. Well, in 9 to 10 months.
Perfect. Thank you. A round of applause, please. Thank you so much, Fernando. And I'll take you back. Just straight ahead.